18. Hollywood stars over 90. Which legend is the oldest? Then and now, 2026. 18 Hollywood legends have crossed the remarkable age of 90, but only one can claim the title of the oldest. From unforgettable screen icons to stars who defined entire generations, see how much they've changed in 2026. Who takes the #1 spot? Stay until the end and subscribe to Hollywood Legends, remembered for more timeless stories. Dick Van Dyke. Dick Van Dyke was already in his mid-30s when television finally made him a household name. Born on December 13, 1925 in Missouri and raised in Illinois, he first found major success on Broadway in Bye Bye Birdie, winning a Tony Award before becoming Rob Petrie on The Dick Van Dyke Show in 1961. The series showcased the physical comedy, dancing, and timing that became his trademarks. Movies soon followed. As Bert in Disney's Mary Poppins, Van Dyke reached an even larger audience, and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang later became another family favorite. When you picture Dick Van Dyke, do you remember Rob Petrie first, or Bert dancing across the rooftops in Mary Poppins? What makes his then and now story remarkable is how long he remained involved in entertainment. In 2024, at 98, Van Dyke became the oldest daytime Emmy winner for his guest performance on Days of Our Lives. A CBS tribute, Dick Van Dyke, 98 Years of Magic, also won an Emmy that year. In November 2025, he published 100 Rules for Living to 100, reflecting on aging, work, family, and the habits that kept him engaged with life. 1 month later, on December 13th, he celebrated his 100th birthday. By August 2026, Dick Van Dyke was 100 years old and still alive, more than 6 decades removed from Mary Poppins, and still one of the most recognizable surviving figures from classic American television and film. Clint Eastwood. Long before the gray hair and quiet image of an elder filmmaker, Clint Eastwood was the lean, squinting cowboy who could dominate a screen with almost no dialogue. After gaining recognition as Rowdy Yates on Rawhide, his breakthrough in Sergio Leone's westerns, including A Fistful of Dollars, turned his weathered face, narrow eyes, and restrained manner into an unmistakable screen image. The transformation continued with Dirty Harry in 1971. As Inspector Harry Callahan, Eastwood became associated with a tougher, more modern kind of anti-hero. Yet his career eventually moved far beyond acting. Behind the camera, he directed films including Unforgiven and $1 Million Baby, both of which won Academy Awards for Best Picture and earned Eastwood Oscars for directing. How many stars from Eastwood's generation could have imagined they would still be making major films after turning 90? Born on May 31, 1930, Eastwood turned 96 in 2026, placing him firmly among Hollywood's remarkable surviving nonagenarian legends. What makes his now especially unusual is how long he remained creatively active. At 94, Eastwood directed the courtroom drama Juror 2, starring Nicholas Hoult and Toni Collette. Cast members described him as calm, efficient, and still deeply engaged with filmmaking. In 2026, Juror remains his most recent released directing project. The young Western star of the 1960s is now a 96-year-old filmmaker whose career has stretched across more than 7 decades, a rare example of Hollywood longevity, both in front of and behind the camera. Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks reached a milestone in 2026 that few Hollywood legends ever experience. He turned 100 years old and was still involved in new comedy. Born Melvin Kaminsky in Brooklyn on June 28, 1926. Brooks went from writing jokes for Sid Caesar's Your Show of Shows to creating some of the most fearless comedies in American film history. His directing career exploded with The Producers, which earned him the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. He followed it with films such as Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, High Anxiety, and Spaceballs, building a style based on parody, absurdity, and a willingness to make fun of almost anything. His work eventually made him one of the rare entertainers to achieve EGOT status, winning Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, and Tony Awards. How many filmmakers can still make audiences laugh and plan new projects after reaching 100? Brooks never completely disappeared into retirement. In January 2026, the documentary Mel Brooks, the 99-year-old man, celebrated his life just months before his centennial birthday. Then came an even more surprising development. At 100, Brooks remained involved with Spaceballs: The New One, the long-awaited sequel to his 1987 comedy. He is returning alongside Rick Moranis, Bill Pullman, Daphne Zuniga, and other original cast members, with the film scheduled for April 23, 2027. From a young comedy writer in post-war television to a centenarian still participating in Hollywood projects, Brooks's then and now story spans more than 7 decades. And at 100 years old in 2026, he stands among the oldest living legends in entertainment. Eva Marie Saint. Eva Marie Saint belongs to a Hollywood generation that has almost completely disappeared. Audiences first saw her on the big screen opposite Marlon Brando in On the Waterfront in 1954, where her restrained performance as Edie Doyle immediately established her as a serious dramatic actress. Remarkably, it was her feature film debut, and it earned her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. 5 years later, Alfred Hitchcock gave Saint one of her most enduring roles as the elegant and mysterious Eve Kendall opposite Cary Grant in North by Northwest. She went on to work with stars including Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor, and Frank Sinatra, while later generations discovered her as Martha Kent in Superman Returns. Her final credited performance came in 2014 when she voiced Katara in The Legend of Korra. How many performers can say they won an Oscar in the 1950s and are still here more than 70 years later? Born on July 4, 1924, Saint celebrated her 102nd birthday in July 2026, making her the oldest living Academy Award winner. She has largely retired from public life, but has said that she still enjoys walking outdoors, watching Los Angeles Dodgers baseball, and spending time with family and friends. Saint was married to television director Jeffrey Hayden for 65 years from 1951 until his death in 2016, and they raised 2 children together. Then Eva Marie Saint was the young newcomer holding her own beside Marlon Brando and Cary Grant. Now, at 102, she is something even rarer, a living connection to Hollywood's golden age, and one of the oldest legends on this list. John Astin. John Astin needed only a raised eyebrow, a thin mustache, and a mischievous smile to make Gomez Addams unforgettable. When the Addams Family premiered in 1964, his wildly affectionate, endlessly enthusiastic patriarch was unlike the restrained television fathers of the era. More than 60 years later, Gomez remains the role most closely associated with Astin, even though his career stretched far beyond the Addams mansion. Born on March 30, 1930, Astin worked steadily in television, film, and theater before and after the series. He appeared in productions including I'm Dickens, He's Fenster Night Court, and The Frighteners, while also moving behind the camera. His short film Prelude received an Academy Award nomination, revealing another side of a performer audiences mainly knew for comedy. How many television stars from the early 1960s are still here to see their most famous character embraced by entirely new generations? Astin eventually found another important role away from Hollywood. A 1952 graduate of Johns Hopkins University, he returned to the school in 2001 and spent 2 decades teaching acting and directing. He served as Homewood Professor of the Arts and Director of Theater Arts and Studies until 2021, and the university later named its theater in his honor. By 2026, Astin had retired from regular acting and celebrated his 96th birthday on March 30th. He is also the last surviving principal cast member of the original Addams Family series. June Squibb. June Squibb's career is unusual because her biggest successes came at an age when most actors have already retired. She spent decades working steadily in theater, film, and television, but widespread recognition arrived much later. After beginning on Broadway in the original production of Gypsy, she eventually moved into films such as Alice, Scent of a Woman, and About Schmidt. Then in 2013, her performance as the blunt, fiercely outspoken Kate Grant in Nebraska earned her an Academy Award nomination at 84. Instead of slowing down afterward, Squibb entered the busiest period of her career. At 94, she received her first leading film role in Thelma, playing a grandmother who sets out across Los Angeles to recover money stolen by scammers. Squibb even performed many of the movie's physical sequences herself. How many performers finally become leading stars after celebrating their 90th birthday? Her momentum continued with Eleanor the Great Scarlett Johansson's directorial debut, followed by another remarkable return to Broadway. In the 2025-26 production of Marjorie Prime Squibb, played the title role, and at 96 became the oldest acting nominee in Tony Awards history. Born on November 6, 1929, Squibb is 96 in 2026. Far from disappearing from the industry, she has continued accepting new projects, including joining the final season of Yellow Jackets. Then June Squibb was a hard-working character actress waiting decades for wider recognition. Now in her mid-90s, she is still breaking records and proving that a Hollywood career does not always peak when you are young. Alan Alda. Alan Alda entered his 90s with something far more lasting than a single famous role. Born on January 28, 1936 in New York City, he grew up around show business but spent years developing his craft before becoming internationally known as Captain Benjamin Franklin Hawkeye Pierce on MASH. From 1972 to 1983, Alda gave Hawkeye an unusual combination of humor intelligence, anger, and compassion. He was also deeply involved behind the camera, writing and directing numerous episodes. His work made him the first performer to win Emmy Awards for acting, writing, and directing the same television series. Could anyone watching Hawkeye in the 1970s have imagined Alda would still be inspiring audiences more than 50 years later? After MASH, Alda refused to live entirely on nostalgia. He appeared in films including Crimes and Misdemeanors, The Aviator, and Marriage Story, while earning another generation of television fans as Senator Arnold Vinnick on The West Wing. His performance in The Aviator brought him an Academy Award nomination. Alda also devoted significant energy to science communication, helping establish what became the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University. In 2018, he publicly revealed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease several years earlier. Rather than withdrawing completely, he continued working, exercising, communicating, and speaking openly about aging. By 2026, Alan Alda was 90 years old, more than half a century removed from the beginning of MASH, yet still remembered for a career built on much more than Hawkeye Pierce. Marion Ross. For millions of television viewers, Marion Ross will always be the smiling mother who welcomed everyone into the Cunningham home. But when Happy Days premiered in 1974, Ross was already 45 and had spent more than 20 years working through small film and television roles without becoming a household name. The part of Marion Cunningham finally gave her the recognition she had waited decades to achieve. Ross remained with Happy Days throughout its 11-season run, creating a television mother who could be affectionate without becoming invisible beside larger personalities like Fonzie. After the series ended, she refused to simply live on nostalgia. Her performance as Sophie Berger in Brooklyn Bridge earned her 2 Emmy nominations, and she later appeared in the Drew Carey show Gilmore Girls, touched by an angel and brothers and sisters. She also introduced herself to younger viewers by voicing Grandma SquarePants on SpongeBob SquarePants. How many viewers who grew up watching Mrs. Cunningham imagined that Marion Ross would still be celebrating life more than 50 years after Happy Days began? Ross eventually retired from acting, but she never completely disappeared from the public eye. In 2021, her hometown of Albert Lea, Minnesota, honored her with a life-size bronze statue outside the Performing Arts Center bearing her name. Born on October 25, 1928. Ross celebrated her 97th birthday in 2025, surrounded by family and receiving a warm public tribute from longtime co-star Henry Winkler. As of August 2026, she is still 97 years old and will turn 98 in October. Then Marion Ross was television's beloved Mrs. C. Now approaching 98, she remains one of the oldest surviving stars from classic American television and a living reminder of just how far the Happy Days era has receded into history. Marla Gibbs. Marla Gibbs reached 95 in 2026, with a career that began unusually late and then refused to slow down. Born Margaret Teresa Bradley in Chicago on June 14, 1931, Gibbs was already a mother of 3 and had worked as a United Airlines reservations agent before seriously pursuing acting. Her breakthrough finally arrived in her 40s, proving that Hollywood success did not have to begin young. Her defining role was Florence Johnston, the sharp-tongued housekeeper on The Jeffersons. Gibbs turned Florence's dry sarcasm and battles with George Jefferson into some of the sitcom's funniest moments, earning 5 Primetime Emmy nominations during the show's run. She later moved into the leading role of Mary Jenkins on 227, which she also helped produce and whose theme song she performed. How many performers can say their biggest break came after 40 and they were still working more than 50 years later? Unlike many stars in their 90s, Gibbs never completely retired. Her later television appearances included blackish young Sheldon Days of Our Lives, Grey's Anatomy, and other projects introducing her to viewers who were born decades after Florence first entered the Jeffersons' apartment. In February 2026, Gibbs published her memoir, It's Never Too Late, reflecting on her childhood, difficult marriage, health struggles, and extraordinary second act in entertainment. On June 14th, she celebrated her 95th birthday surrounded by family and friends. Then a late-blooming actress fighting for her opportunity. Now a 95-year-old television legend whose 7-decade career still makes her one of Hollywood's most remarkable survivors. Lee Grant. Lee Grant's place among Hollywood's oldest living stars is especially remarkable because her career was nearly taken away from her just as it was beginning. Her first major film, Detective Story, in 1951, immediately earned her an Academy Award nomination. Instead of opening every Hollywood door, however, that promising start was followed by roughly 12 years on the industry blacklist during the anti-communist era. Grant refused to cooperate by naming people, including her then-husband, writer Arnold Manoff, and film and television opportunities largely disappeared. How many performers could lose more than a decade of their career and still return to become an Oscar winner? Grant eventually did. After returning to television in Peyton Place, she appeared in major films including In the Heat of the Night, The Landlord, and Shampoo. Her performance as Felicia in Shampoo earned her the 1976 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress, 24 years after her first nomination. She then built an impressive second career behind the camera. Grant directed features and socially conscious documentaries, including Tell Me a Riddle and Down and Out in America, which won the Academy Award for Best Documentary. In 1987, she also became the first woman to win the DGA Award in the television movie directing category. Grant celebrated her 100th birthday on October 31, 2025. Although older sources have disagreed about her birth year, public records support 1925. That makes her 100 in August 2026, approaching 101. Then Lee Grant was a young actress whose future was abruptly blocked. Now, a century into her life, she stands as one of Hollywood's oldest surviving Oscar winners and one of its most extraordinary comeback stories. Terry Moore. Terry Moore belongs to a disappearing generation of performers who actually worked during Hollywood's golden age, and in 2026, she was still here to remember it. Born Helen Luella Coford on January 7, 1929 in California, Moore began appearing in films as a child in 1940 before adopting the name Terry Moore later that decade. Her breakthrough came with Mighty Joe Young in 1949, but her most acclaimed performance arrived opposite Burt Lancaster in Come Back Little Sheba. Playing the young boarder Marie Buckholder earned Moore an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress at the 1953 Oscars. She later appeared in films including Beneath the 12-Mile Reef and Peyton Place, becoming a familiar face of 1950s cinema. How many actresses who began working before World War II can still say they remained connected to filmmaking more than 8 decades later? Moore never formally retired. At 94, she starred as the mysterious Lady in Black in Silent Life, a film connected to the legend of silent screen icon Rudolph Valentino. In a 2023 interview, Moore said simply that she had started working as a child and never quit. By 2026, Terry Moore was 97 years old, making her one of the oldest surviving actresses from classical Hollywood. Professional listings continued to describe her as an actress with a career stretching from 1940 into the present era. From a child performer in studio-era Hollywood to an Oscar nominee still appearing on screen in her 90s, Moore's then and now journey spans an extraordinary 86 years. Lee Meriwether. Long before Lee Meriwether slipped into Catwoman's black suit, America already knew her face. At 19, she won Miss America 1955, then used the opportunity not simply as a beauty pageant victory, but as a doorway into television and serious acting training. She worked on NBC's Today and studied with Lee Strasberg before gradually building a career that would stretch across several generations of television. Her most enduring movie image arrived in 1966, when she replaced Julie Newmar as Catwoman in the theatrical Batman film opposite Adam West. That same period brought the time tunnel, but Meriwether's longest-running success came as Betty Jones on Barnaby Jones. She stayed with the CBS detective series for 8 seasons, earning Golden Globe and Emmy recognition for the role. How many former Miss Americas could claim a television career lasting more than half a century? Meriwether kept reinventing herself. She later played Lily Munster on The Munsters Today and Ruth Martin on All My Children, while continuing to appear in theater and occasional film and television projects. Born on May 27, 1935, Meriwether celebrated her 91st birthday in May 2026. She is now largely retired from regular screen acting, but her Catwoman remains part of the character's long cinematic history. Then, Lee Meriwether was a young beauty queen trying to prove she could act. Now at 91, she stands as one of classic television's surviving stars, a performer whose career became far more enduring than the crown that first made her famous. Lois Smith. Lois Smith has spent more than 7 decades proving that an acting career does not have to fade with age. Born in Topeka, Kansas on November 3, 1930, she made her film debut opposite James Dean in Elia Kazan's East of Eden in 1955. 15 years later, she delivered another memorable performance as Partita Dupia in 5 Easy Pieces, earning major critical recognition. How many performers can still reach new career milestones after turning 90? Smith did exactly that. In 2021, at age 90, she won her first Tony Award for playing Margaret in The Inheritance, becoming the oldest performer at that time to win an acting Tony. And she kept working. Smith appeared as the mysterious Helen in The Uninvited, which received its U.S. theatrical release in 2025 alongside Elizabeth Reeser, Walton Goggins, and Pedro Pascal. By August 2026, Lois Smith was 95 years old. From sharing the screen with James Dean in the 1950s to taking substantial roles nearly 70 years later, her then and now story is remarkable not because she returned from retirement, but because she never truly left. Tom Skerritt. Tom Skerritt has never been the kind of Hollywood star who needed to dominate every scene. His calm, authority-weathered face and understated delivery made him memorable in roles ranging from Captain Dallas in Alien to Viper in Top Gun. Remarkably, more than 6 decades after his film debut, Skerritt remains a recognizable link to several different eras of American cinema. Born on August 25, 1933 in Detroit, Skerritt served 4 years in the U.S. Air Force before pursuing acting. His first feature, War Hunt, arrived in 1962, but his breakthrough came as Duke Forrest in Robert Altman's MASH. He later appeared in the Turning Point, Alien Steel Magnolias, A River Runs Through It, and Top Gun. Television brought another career high when his performance as Sheriff Jimmy Brock in Picket Fences earned him a Primetime Emmy. How many actors who appeared in 1960s Hollywood are still meeting fans and celebrating their work more than 60 years later? Skerritt's later life has also been shaped by service. In 2012, he co-founded the Red Badge Project, which uses storytelling and writing to help military veterans dealing with PTSD, anxiety, and depression reconnect with their experiences and communities. As of August 2026, Skerritt is 92 years old and will turn 93 on August 25. He has not completely withdrawn from public life. Either he is scheduled to appear at Rose City Comic-Con in September, alongside fellow Alien veteran Veronica Cartwright. Then Tom Skerritt was the rugged supporting actor audiences recognized everywhere. Now approaching 93, he remains one of Hollywood's oldest living stars, and proof that a quiet presence can leave a very long shadow. Russ Tamblyn. Tamblyn proved he was more than a musical performer when his role as Norman Page in Peyton Place earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. But the performance most audiences still associate with him came in 1961 when he played riff leader of the Jets in West Side Story. Decades later, another generation discovered him as the eccentric Dr. Lawrence Jacoby in David Lynch's Twin Peaks. Which Russ Tamblyn do you remember most? The acrobatic riff or the mysterious Dr. Jacoby? Away from mainstream Hollywood, Tamblyn also developed a serious career as a painter, collage artist, choreographer, and filmmaker. His artwork has been shown in galleries and museums while acting became increasingly selective. His most recent credited screen appearance was in a 2018 episode of The Haunting of Hill House. In 2024, Tamblyn published his memoir, Dancing on the Edge, completed after more than 2 decades of work and edited in part by his daughter, actress and writer, Amber Tamblyn. By 2026, Russ Tamblyn was 91 years old, an Oscar-nominated survivor of classic Hollywood whose career has stretched from the studio era to modern television. Estelle Parsons. Estelle Parsons reached Hollywood relatively late, but once audiences noticed her, she proved almost impossible to forget. Already approaching 40 when she began gaining significant film roles, she brought a fierce, nervous energy to Blanche Barrow in 1967's Bonnie and Clyde. The performance won her the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress and transformed a longtime stage performer into a nationally recognized screen actress. Her path had never been conventional. Before acting took over, Parsons studied law, sang professionally, and worked at NBC's Today, where she became one of television's early female commentators. She eventually chose theater, building a Broadway career that produced multiple Tony nominations while also directing major stage productions. How many performers can win an Oscar in the 1960s and still be actively discussing their craft nearly 60 years later? Television gave Parsons another generation of fans when she began playing Beverly Harris, Roseanne Connor's outspoken mother on Roseanne. She later returned to the character in The Connors, showing the same sharp comic timing that had defined much of her career. Born on November 20, 1927. Parsons is 98 years old in August 2026 and will turn 99 in November. She has remained connected to New York theater in February 2026. Theater for the New City honored her at its Love and Courage Gala, and new podcast interviews with Parsons were released that July, reflecting on her extraordinary 9-decade journey in performance. Then Estelle Parsons was the fearless character actress, stealing scenes in Bonnie and Clyde. Now, at 98, she remains one of Hollywood's oldest living Oscar winners and a remarkable example of a career that never depended on youth to endure.